All right, it is my privilege and pleasure to introduce you to one of my favorite speakers that you have probably seen before. Lin Sparrow Christy is a teacher, writer, life coach, and hypnotherapist. Her central mission has been to help people, today's spiritual seekers, find pathways to authentic growth. She has more than 40 years' experience in both traditional and alternative approaches to spirituality and growth. She was first introduced to the EDGAR CAYCE material more than 40 years ago and still feels that the CAYCE material revolutionized Western spirituality and is as relevant today as it was when first CAYCE started working. She's a master hypnotherapist and a hypnosis trainer, neuro-linguistic programming practitioner and life coach. She maintains a private practice in Virginia Beach, the author of 3 books and numerous ARE home study courses. She has served as a licensed minister with the Disciples of Christ Christian Church in Virginia for 2 local congregations over the past 10 years. And I've told some of you before, Lynn is the one that taught me how to give a lecture. Will you give a big hand to Lynn Sparrow?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm really happy to be here to share with you some perspectives from CAYCE and others about soul purpose. Because I'll tell you, the longer I live, the more convinced I am that it is a topic of universal importance that never goes away till the day we leave this planet. In fact, one of the things that I see as a hypnotherapist, life coach, spiritual mentor, is that getting stuck around questions of soul purpose is the #1 thing that brings people to my office. And of course, we certainly have in the CAYCE material the idea that soul purpose is central. And what is the purpose of each soul entering a material manifestation? It is not then that there may be the satisfying of the mental or material body or mind. It is not to the indulgence of, nor to the glory of self alone. Now that's a somewhat disquieting passage because let's face it, at the end of the day, we all just want to be happy and feel good. But there is this drive in the human being to maximize whatever possibilities may lie dormant within us. And from the time we embark on a spiritual path, that is on steroids. And so one of the things that will often plague the spiritual seeker is that disconcerting sense that there is something yet to be done, that there is something not quite being brought to manifestation or fruition. And that seems to be one of the greatest sources of our human tendency to discontent and to some of the lurking anxiety and depression, not to mention the sugar, by the way, Joe, that was great, because that's another huge aspect of it. And the pioneer developmental psychologist Abraham Maslow put it this way: I warn you, if you deliberately set out to be less than you are capable of becoming, you will be deeply unhappy for the rest of your life. More sleeplessness, more generalized anxiety, more feelings of unhappiness stem from this than any other factor that I'm aware of in terms of how people work with the opportunities of their lifetime. To give you 2 examples from people that I have worked with in the past. Karen came to me. She had a life that many people who work hard for a living would find just absolutely to die for. Her days consisted of puttering around her house and redecorating, meeting her girlfriends for lunch, and going shopping. And yet she felt empty, she felt hollow, she sensed that she had a purpose that was not being fulfilled, and she was profoundly unhappy. And it just so happened that about the same time, Kathy came to see me, and she was the polar opposite. Kathy had a strong sense of a spiritual purpose in a healing field, but she didn't know how to get from where she was to there. She was working hard at a job that she hated. She was feeling completely used up. She was feeling cut off from her purpose, and therefore she was stressed out, sleepless, anxious, unhappy with her life. But if being out of touch with and not on purpose with our soul mission is one of the greatest things contributing to our unhappiness in life, I have also come to the conclusion that not really knowing what soul purpose is the second biggest cause. You know, we tend to think of finding soul purpose like solving a mystery or figuring out a puzzle or decoding a code. You know, okay, if I can, and you just see the proliferation of ways to get at your soul purpose. And underlying that is the idea that if you once figure it out, you're done, you just do that and everything will be fine. Well, I'm speaking to a group of people who work for a spiritually oriented organization. How many of you, day in and day out, year after year, really feel like you're living your soul purpose? Because the truth is, if we continue to grow, if we continue to push the edges, we will always be dealing with that nagging question of, is this it? Am I doing what it is that is for me to do now? Even somebody in a soul purposey sounding work like mine grapples with that. Or as I call it in my darker days, fear of getting an F for the incarnation. But you know, it's, if we think that we have our soul purpose question answered, often what it means is we've stopped growing, we've stopped looking, we've stopped asking. So what do we do with that ongoing sense of wanting to not only find a purpose, but stay on purpose? Well, I think that the first place to begin, and something that has been very so Casey mirrors what Maslow said when he talks about only when you seek to have thy way, thy desire, without thought of thy purpose in the earth, do the real disappointments come. I like to think of it in terms of 3 levels to soul purpose. There is a cosmological purpose that is the same for every human being on this planet. And that beautiful reading that Kevin shared when he said it was one of his favorites speaks to that cosmological purpose. Then there is that specific question of vocation, how you answer the question, what do you do, or where do you go when you get out of bed each day? But then within that, there is the sphere of daily choices, priorities, and behaviors. All 3 of these interlock around the issue of soul purpose. And if you want to know how to get stuck, if you want to know how to be completely stalled out, it's to focus here first. Thinking that you answered this question when you first joined the path, and thinking you're too busy to give all this a lot of attention. If we want the prescription for getting stuck, it's to stay focused here, give little new thought to this, and be too busy for this. When we think that it's all about discovering that vocation, unlocking that code, we embark on what I call the mystery-solving approach to soul purpose. But of course, we have EDGAR CAYCE saying things like this: not some great deed or act or speech, but line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. I know you've all heard it. How recently have you thought about it and applied it to the daily life that you're living? Not a sounding of trumpets as to what is being accomplished, but in the quiet of thine own conscience, lay the plans for that which may be accomplished. And in the acts day by day, so build that as conforms to his way. For as he has given, those that seek to know the Lord and do his bidding shall not go empty-handed, neither shall his seed beg bread. There is a promise embedded in that. But notice that it has to do with that day by day action of tuning in. In his book, Lost Christianity, Jacob Needleman describes a soul-stirring movement of the spirit as an energy that actually forms the soul. And we could say that part of that cosmological, universally shared purpose is the becoming of our souls. And Needleman talks about not some great mystery to be solved, but a daily opportunity that we often overlook for our soul to be birthed. Every day, every more or less average human individual experiences the appearance of this soul-stirring energy in its most embryonic stage. But almost always, almost without any exception whatsoever, this new energy is immediately dispersed and comes to nothing. 100, 1,000 times a day perhaps, the soul is aborted. And what I'm suggesting to all of us is that we abort the soul when we think that we can't do anything until we solve that vocational question about soul purpose. When we stop asking new questions about cosmological purpose. I'm going to suggest that if you still believe the cosmological purpose that we all share is exactly the way you understood it when you first got on the path, and you think of it in the same way as you thought about it when you first got on the path, you're probably not giving enough attention to letting that stretch you, to giving yourself an opportunity to relate to the cosmos when it comes to your cosmological purpose. And then we get into the whole evolutionary thing, which I not only don't have time for, I didn't intend it to. But our soul purpose on that cosmological level is about getting in touch on a daily basis with the things that align us with that greater shared purpose of all humanity. And we need not fall into the trap of thinking that we have to find a great big new something that has the word spiritual stamped over it. Because the truth is, spirit plays to our strengths. Even the CEO of a small company is not going to take the artist who can't add a column of numbers together and say, you're going to work in the accounting department. And yet we have this weird idea that soul purpose will sometimes lead us into doing something that's difficult. I remember when I was young and went to a school that had the word missionary college in its name. When visiting missionaries would come, everybody would be terrified that the Spirit was going to convict them and that their life was to be a missionary and go to Africa. This idea that if we once surrender to what God wants, it's going to be very unpleasant indeed. And that's part of what makes us hide and run. Don't want to really look too closely at that because maybe it's not what I want to see. And yet, it only makes sense that spirit would play to our strengths, the things that we find joy and pleasure in. Hugo von Hofmannsthal, who, yes, I never heard of either till I found this great quote. He's an Austrian playwright, lyricist, and novelist. Where is yourself to be found? Always in the deepest enchantment you have experienced. Now, enchantment the first dictionary definition of enchantment is not the one about magic and spells. It's about totally pleasurable, absorbing, and something that gives you a sense of connection. So, if we want to think about ongoing work with soul purpose, which is part of, by the way, the shared purpose we all have, part of our shared cosmological purpose is to keep plumbing the question of purpose, we need to remember that every one of us is an essential part of the cosmological plan. Thus, the innate desire to be associated with those doing big things, things having to do with great movements of one nature or another. But remember, It is the tiniest cog that moves the greater machine. And each corpuscle of the body must be in accord with the divine. Elsewhere in the readings, many times, we are called corpuscles in the body of God. And just as a corpuscle within our body that's out of whack is going to wreak havoc, and one that's healthy is going to support the overall, our sole purpose on a day-by-day basis really does have most to do with doing a good job of being a small cog. That doesn't feed the ego, but it's where the real work happens. So I'd like to leave you with the idea of what are 3 keys to staying on course. I've called them inspiration, aspiration, and determination. Now, aspiration in its root means to breathe upon, to blow upon. And this is the place where we allow ourselves to tend the vision. We avail ourselves of resources. This is where you go to conferences and you read books and you keep yourself alive and fed. You gather information. And this, of course, is the realm of the mind, a key part of staying fresh. Sometimes aspects of soul purpose emerge in the least likely places as you encounter some new information that you're not going to encounter if you think you've already read all the books, or you've already heard it all, or there's nothing new. Because what can always be new is the aha in the way information hits you, even if you've heard it 100 times before. Now, inspiration is a breathing in. Aspiration is like you're trying to get the fire started. You breathe on it, you keep it going. Inspiration, you tend to that connection. You step into flow, energy, guidance, attunement. And of course, this is the domain of spirit. And one of the things that it was interesting, a piece of guidance I got years ago, and day before yesterday, yesterday said, I got the most interesting guidance yesterday. It was identical to what I had received as well. And it's that in the now. If you ask, what should I do now? You will always get reliable guidance. Not what should I do tomorrow or next week, but if you attune and then say, what should I do right now? You can rely on that. And sometimes we want to get the whole road instead of letting the headlights just light up what's immediately ahead of us. And then finally, there's determination. This is the realm of choice and persistence and action and behavior, and it has to do with will. Now, you students of the CAYCE readings will recognize 3 elements there: spirit, mind, and will, given in the CAYCE material as the core of who we are and what we're about. So as we attend to these things, they're all part of the little circles in the smallest part of that 3-part soul purpose. They have to do with our daily priorities, our daily choices, our daily ways of staying connected to being on course. Those are the factors that will keep us ever alive, will pull us out of stuckness when we get stuck, will fine-tune our sense of purpose if we get off course, or open up new horizons that we may never have expected. My client Karen, who was feeling so dead in her easy lifestyle, thought that when she found her soul purpose, it would be one of those things that had the word spiritual plastered all over it. But as she began to really attune, as she began to pursue her enchantment, as she began to explore what her strengths were, she realized that selling real estate was the very best aspect of manifestation of her soul purpose. Her love of decorating, her feeling about wanting people to be happily established in a home that supported their family life. It all came together in a way that she would never have expected. And my client Cassie, who did know what she thought her soul purpose was, but felt hopelessly cut off from it, as she took to heart, working on these levels, realized that this job she had was the perfect way to build the funding so the time could come that she could take the training she wanted to do the healing work that was so much a part of her soul purpose. And that changed her experience of that job from being a stressful treadmill that kept her from her purpose to being the enabler of her purpose. And needless to say, everything changed then. And so, final word from EDGAR CAYCE: think never that the opportunities have passed. Forever is there set before thee a choice to make, and has always been given. Today, and I'm going to even throw in the word now, is the acceptable year, the acceptable day of the Lord. It is never too late to begin, even in an experience. For life in its experience is a continuous effort. We're never done opening out to our soul purpose.